Welcome to Creative Genius Not. If you're new to this podcast, it is a space for creativity, well-being, sustainability from the change makers, a place for creative souls to come and fill up. This episode, I speak to Louis Lagout, the European branch director of One Tree Planted. And it's a very special episode for me because last year I decided to partner with this organisation to support their global reforestation efforts as part of my business. So for every new client I take on, I plant some trees. We really get into some topics which I'm sure lots of you are just as obsessed with as I am. So reforestation, turning a global message into tangible results, thinking local. We talk about the 6 pillars that One Tree Planted live by. It's an absolutely incredible episode and I'm left feeling massively inspired by the conversation. So kick back, grab a brew and let's get into it. Hello. How's it going?
Hi. Good. Yeah, very good. Thank you. And thank you for having me on. I'm excited to talk about trees and why they're so important.
So I guess we can kick things off with a little bit about One Tree Planted and what you do. Sure.
So One Tree Planted, we're a charity and our mission is very simple and it's to plant trees. So we were started in 2014. So we are fairly young. And we decided to have a very simple model. And from the beginning, we had a model where every dollar donated plants one tree. So the way that we're able to do that is we're not the ones going out and planting the trees ourselves, but we're funding projects carried out by really great organizations all over the world. So we work with the World Resources Institute, the United States Forest Service. Sometimes we're working with small charities on the ground, large charities, and they have these great projects and we're able to fund them and help them scale up their impact and scale up the number of trees they're planting.
So where did it actually all come from, this idea then? Was it kind of one person's brainchild and then it just grew really organically, or was it a team of people?
Yeah, so it's actually Matt who started it, a guy called Matt Hill. He's the founder of One Tree Planted, and he saw a bit of a gap in the fact that companies wanting to do sustainability, they wanted to do something which was very tangible and also, I think, which had a very kind of numerical outcome, a number of trees, a very easy metric to have. So that's why, he set it up. He saw a bit of, an opportunity and it's grown really well, especially in the last few years, between 2017 and 2020. For the first 3 years, it's really, it grew fairly slowly because the thing is, it's about finding the right partners. It's about finding the correct strategic partners like the World Resource Institute, like the United States Forest Service, who are able to help us with their expertise, who are the ones able to kind of direct projects to us which need funding. But then in the last two years, we've really grown a lot. And we've gone from a team of maybe 6 or 7 people to about 30.
Wow.
So
that's amazing.
It's been a very, very busy time.
So do you think that that's been a little bit because there's been a lot more awareness about climate change, and that's kind of come a really good time where people are starting to take action and more positive steps to, say, from a business point of view, in making sure that they are doing their bit? Do you think that that's why it's grown, or do you think it's probably a combination of that and the partnerships that have taken some time to get together?
Yeah, I think it was a matter of businesses wanting to do things which are more tangible. Also, just tree planting became a bit of a buzzword, and there's been more interest in it than there was before because companies wanted to do something tangible, because it's also something which companies use to market products. For every product they sell, they plant a tree. Consumers are increasingly engaged in these issues and want to be buying from companies that are responsible and that are making a difference. So it's really a combination of factors, but I think it's going to continue really to grow, and I think it's consumers are picky when they buy things, and companies are therefore having to respond to that by really trying to have a positive impact by carrying out programs such as these. Yeah, I really kind of always really cared about ecological restoration, things like rivers, lakes, meadows, forests, all of the habitats and ecosystems which are so wonderful and which we really are damaging so much. And what happened was I was working in South America, in Ecuador, for a social enterprise out there, and we wanted to do a reforestation program on a small scale, and we needed an organization to fund it. And I reached out and found One Tree Planted. One Tree Planted ended up funding the project, and then I just kind of stayed involved, and eventually I decided to join One Tree Planted. And that was probably about 2 years ago that I kind of, joined full time. But it was maybe 4 years ago now that first started talking with One Tree Planted and heard about it.
Ah, that's awesome. So you've been part of that journey from the other side. So somebody out there actually like looking at putting a project together and a team together and a partner. And so you're kind of both sided. Exactly. And,
it is very, very tricky sometimes to find funding for these sorts of projects, especially if it's around, if it's small to medium sized projects. And so, just seeing how easy it was for One Tree Planted to help fund the project, for us to carry it out, it made me realize that, it was an organization which I'd really enjoy working for.
It's really weird, actually, because over the last few days, I've been thinking about where my passion for preserving our ecosystems come from. And it's just kind of grown and grown and grown. And so when I thought I want to go self-employed and start my own marketing agency, I wanted to kind of build it on that. So it was like a little bit of like a heartbeat of me. And so I was really drawn to One Tree Planted. I knew I wanted to kind of partner with an organisation like that. And I loved the flexibility and the simplicity of the model of, $1 plants, one tree. And I thought it allows me to kind of see a tangible result there with everything that I contribute as time goes on. Hopefully, as I grow, my contribution can grow. And so I was just like totally drawn to that. And I'm always really keen to understand where that consciousness comes from. I think children today are a lot more aware than maybe we would have been as children.
Yeah, I think I grew up in very kind of rural areas, which I think played a part in it. And I think also having parents that cared a lot about not just these issues, but, social justice issues, environmental issues, and very early understanding that we are on a finite planet, really. I mean, a planet with finite resources, and that we sometimes, act like, we have infinite resources and we just need to grow and grow and grow and consume more and more and more. And how important it is to really consume less, to consume responsibly. And I think it all just comes into kind of a general worldview, which I think I kind of gradually developed. Also, I was at school in the States for 2 years, and there I had a really, really great environmental systems teacher who would take us out into the forest a lot, or, seeing rivers, all of these, amazing places, and even places which you wouldn't necessarily think are amazing, but then when you look closely, you see that they're teeming with life. And it was very interesting to start understanding in that class and to start seeing things more from a systems perspective. So not just problems with, water or deforestation or pollution, but how everything's interconnected. All of these environmental systems depend on each other, and how if you damage it in one way, it can negatively impact it in many different ways. And that was just that kind of, I feel like put a structure and gave me a kind of framework through which to understand kind of what the damage we're doing and what can be done. Because before I knew I cared, but I wasn't, it was hard to kind of articulate and diagnose exactly what I felt was wrong, but that
because really it's so big, isn't it? It's such a big issue that it's like really hard to digest it on the scale that it is. But I think for me, like I've sort of gone, it's a massive issue and there's loads of things that we're not doing well, but I can start with this small thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also with regards to the kind of general environment climate discourse, I feel like that there is maybe a bit too much of a focus on something, for example, like, carbon. I mean, obviously, carbon dioxide is what is causing climate change, which is having all these devastating impacts we see. But I feel like to everyday people, it feels very out of touch, carbon particulate in the atmosphere. And maybe if we make it so that people can understand what does this mean locally around them, and how can they do that? How can they, repair the environments around them, looking at things like soil, water, the health of their rivers, which species are missing from where they are. All of these things, and kind of, bringing that kind of general global environmental message into kind of all of these local complexities is actually, I think, makes it more tangible, and I think gives people a way to start doing something. So, and how we can't feel like as individuals we can do something about carbon particulate in the atmosphere, but if we take it one step at a time and break everything out into the, what are the different problems that this is a symptom of, then we can look at, how can we have, wildflower meadows, or how can we turn some of our agricultural land into forests? How can we, restore rivers? Even, small things like, creating wetlands in the UK, especially, helping species like hedgehogs or, small mammals, which are having a really, really bad time. So I think, bringing it down a level is really important as well.
So why do you think it's so important for businesses to adopt changes and partner with companies and do their bit really for corporate and social responsibility? Like, how important is it that we all do our bit to reach sustainability goals?
No meaningful change can happen really until industry gets involved, and that's businesses, corporates, because all of the damage, the vast majority of the damage which is being done to the earth, whether it's kind of the chopping down of rainforest for soy or palm oil, natural resource extraction, those are all the supply chains of global companies. And every time we buy something, there is a supply chain, however kind of sustainable we think it is. And I mean, some products really are, but the vast majority have a very long and complex supply chain, which probably at some point, impacted the earth in a negative way. So I think one part of it is we have to generally kind of reduce consumption, and we have to kind of break away from this mindset that, we have to be continuously growing everything, and, our economies have to be continuously growing, because we're on a world with finite resources, and we have to really reevaluate what are the things that we value. That there is an ecological ceiling to what we can produce sustainably on this planet. And so it's really good to see companies take that into account, maybe really making products that are going to last longer, building products that can be repaired more easily, and also that can be reused, moving away from disposable items. And I think the responsibility really lies with companies and with individuals. I think individuals can make a lot of difference with their purchasing power, which is why companies, I think, are changing. Some companies change because their leadership really wants them to have, a good impact and, lessen the damage they're doing to the environment. And some companies are changing purely because they want to protect their profit.
Supply and demand, isn't it? Yeah, absolutely.
Because it's showing that the consumers are demanding that. But it's really important to keep pressure up on especially, I mean, there's kind of two levels. There's the small companies who are doing it for the really good reasons, and then there's the kind of huge corporate bodies that are kind of working almost on a whole other scale. But it's really important to keep up as much pressure as possible on and not just with regards to the environment, but also looking at supply chains, making sure that everyone in those supply chains is getting paid fair wages, that the products are not polluting, that land uses or wealth, anything which is timber. It's really important to make sure that those supply chains are not logging anywhere which shouldn't be. It's a whole kind of it's a mixture of companies starting to realize that even sometimes for their own success and longevity, they have to take these measures, because no one's going to really be able to make any money when the planet's on fire. But then also on the other hand, smaller companies who are doing it, in every way they can. So yeah, there's companies pushing the change, and then there's consumers pushing the change, and it's coming from both ends.
I think there's a really massive impact on the culture of organisations. And like you said, there's two approaches. There's ones that are being forced to do it because people will stop buying from them. And then there's thought leaders in senior positions in companies that are saying, even if it costs us more money, we are going to do the right thing. And that is X, Y, and Z. And I think that is where it's really important for businesses to adopt. And the culture always comes from the top. It always is fed down. Like the founders of a business, it's usually their imprint that then follows because they hire like-minded people and etc. And I think as a business grows, a lot of that culture can get lost. So there's probably some definitely amazing ways that businesses, these large corporate businesses, can get back to the root of the culture of their business and why it started, and that kind of love again. And then within that, find the heart of the business, because it is easier for a small business like myself to do something because it's just me, or there's a few of us, and it's easy to get everyone on board. Easy to keep everyone updated and put passion and inspiration into people, but it does get lost. I mean, again, one of the main reasons why I wanted to start off on my own is because I thought I wanted to. There was so many things that got lost in the culture of the businesses that I worked for, which I felt were like really key parts of enjoying your job and just, So I think there's definitely a lot to be said for that culture part that you touched on there. I guess it brings me back to the amazing things, trees, and why trees. And just if we could touch on the 6 pillars of reforestation.
Yes, I mean, we have a very, we try to explain some of the benefits through kind of looking at 6 impacts, which are air, water, biodiversity, social impact, health, and climate. So, air, obviously, trees, and plants in general, but all of the air and the oxygen that we breathe in comes from plants. So that's why it's really important to have them. I mean, it's not like deforestation is going to cause us to run out of oxygen, but it's really important for trees to be able to contribute to this process of taking CO2 out, turning it into oxygen, which then touches on the climate side. And also, trees in cities have been shown to reduce air pollution. And even in things like, temperature regulation, trees, streets lined with trees have a lower average temperature when it's very, very hot.
I didn't know that.
Much, much lower. So, they can save a lot of energy also by lowering cooling costs of buildings which have air conditioning. So that's the air impact. In water, I mean, so water and water scarcities increasingly becoming a really, really major environmental topic and an issue, because as we're seeing in California right now, long droughts, long periods of dry weather are really in some parts of the world causing a lot of problems. And trees can really help with the hydrological cycle, because when water does fall, and in places where you have, it's a very dry area, sometimes they do get quite a lot of rainfall in total in the year, but it kind of comes maybe in short bursts. So trees can really help slow water down, get water down into aquifers through the roots. They can hold water up, and that means that instead of the water just falling and running off, the water kind of stays in the system. It's amazing that in the Amazon rainforest, an awful lot of the rain which falls is actually created by the rainforest itself.
Oh, wow.
Because, the trees, even if you just think of, the house plants in your house, sometimes you look at the house plant and there's some water drops on the end of the leaves, just appear on their own. So trees and, plants in general, they take water out of the ground, or they take humidity in the air and, bring it up into the clouds, which then creates more rain. So the Amazon rainforest creates a lot of its own rain. And so instead of that fresh water, which is so precious in the world, fresh water just kind of running off into the sea, it stays in that cycle and keeping it humid, watering the plants and creating all that growth, which is why when, you have something like, deforestation of large areas of the Amazon, it's not as simple as kind of returning, putting trees and they'll grow again, because the forest itself is creating the climate which it needs to survive. So that's why it's so important, especially in places like the Amazon, to keep, to protect it, because you can't really fix it once it's gone. That's water.
I saw it was only just a short video clip once, and it's always stayed with me. And it was this, are they called bambus trees? Those really massive trees in Africa.
Oh, baobab, maybe.
That's it. Yeah, they're amazing. And there was this one tree that was basically somewhere, it was like a very remote place, and they'd hollowed the tree out. And then when they had these kind of flash flood rainfalls and stuff, all the water would gather in this tree, and then it would be their water source for this particular small community for like most of the year, because it was so hot there. And it's like, that just really blew my mind, like how just that one tree, how that's keeping this whole community of people alive. And it just reminded me when you were saying about the water. And
another role that they play with regards to water is just shading soil, preventing soil from drying out. It's really important just to, especially, in England, we don't really have to worry about it that much. But, in many parts of the world, fresh water is really, really scarce. And, when you have a layer of vegetation over the soil, it means that the soil can retain that water, it doesn't dry out. But when you have just bare soil, any water that falls is just going to be, wicked away straight away. It's going to evaporate immediately. So, and that also kind of plays into then something which isn't in the 6 pillars, but is kind of linked to all of it, which is soil. Soil is so important. We are having a bit of a problem with soil worldwide. An awful lot of our soil is degraded because, we use lots of chemical fertilizers on it. Even in the UK and Europe, a terrifying amount of our agricultural soil is severely degraded. Oh. So trees can help, preserve soil. Yeah, and without soil, we have no food. We're dependent on a basically 2 or 3 inch layer of topsoil. On our world's land masses, we're dependent on that for all the food we eat.
I did not know that the soil was such an issue. I mean, that's that's so interesting.
And soil and trees can help because, first of all, they prevent erosion. So, when you have no vegetation and rain falls and it's very dry, all of that topsoil, which is full of nutrients, just washes out into the ocean, in the river systems. And then even when that's in the ocean, it can cause problems because it can cause algal blooms, because those nutrients in the water cause algal blooms, which can then damage coral reefs. So, like I said, everything's very interconnected. It's all based. So that's also important. And that also plays into biodiversity, which, forests are the main home of most terrestrial, biodiversity. They have so many species, so many plants. So it's really, really important, if we are going to preserve the biodiversity of our planet, to restore forests so that the animals, plants, flora, fauna, have places where they can thrive. That's biodiversity. And then social impact, a lot of communities depend on forests, live near forests. So some of the programs we do are working, for example, with farmers, with communities on the ground. And so it can have a good social impact for them. Health impact is kind of, I feel, is more the fact that being around trees in the kind of urban setting is really good. So that's more kind of how it impacts on us from a mental health perspective. Studies show that people who spend time around trees have better mental health. So that's more of, how nice it is to just go outside and have a beautiful green space, have some trees. And the last one is climate, which again is all interconnected, but trees capture an awful lot of carbon dioxide. And, we really need as many carbon sinks as we can get if we want to try balance things out.
So that kind of leads on to talk about, obviously, One Tree Planted is a global organisation that's already had a massive impact. So there's lots of different projects going on, North America, Latin America, Africa, Asia and the Pacific. So do those projects in those different areas, are they different types of projects or is it the same? Could you talk us through some of those projects and what they're about?
Projects are very, very different. So we have a whole range. So some projects, for example, in the States, will be focused on wildfire recovery. And these are projects in areas where there is no one really living. It's national forest, it's very remote. So when those projects take place and when the planting of trees takes place there, it's often tree planting professionals, people who go out and they'll just replant thousands of acres with the species that were lost, with little saplings, and that's it. And then you kind of wait for it to grow and it comes back. And then the other side of the projects is when you're kind of trying to strike a balance between people living in an environment and how it used to be forest or how it could be forested. So where there's that kind of interconnection between people and the natural landscape. And this is, for example, the case in Peru, where we have agroforestry projects. So agroforestry is systems of agriculture, which can include forestry as well. So instead of something like cattle ranching, where everything pretty much gets stripped down to bare soil, and we know all the problems that can cause, then it's a system of a mixture of maybe mixing cocoa trees with maybe avocado, coffee, papaya. So all these kind of crops which can generate an income, but then also mixed in with native species so that it still creates habitat for native wildlife, so that it's still providing those ecosystem services. It's still kind of drawing in water into the ground. It's preventing all the soil from drying out. And it's regulating that kind of micro environment. So those are two very different types of projects. And, for every project, we look at the impact, the social impact, the environmental impact. What is the kind of ecological context that it's taking place in? And so it can mean that, we some of our projects are kind of planting mangroves in the Bay of Bengal, and then some of them are kind of planting, trees high up in the Andes. So completely different parts of the world and different projects.
Those different projects, how do you, I know you mentioned earlier about partnering with companies, but do you also get the local communities involved, or how does managing that project work?
All the projects are carried out by our partners on the ground. So it's really important to us that we're not coming down it's not a top-down type of process where we're coming in and being like, oh, okay, this organization in Ethiopia, this is what you should do. These are the type of trees you could plant. Absolutely not. There's such expertise and, fantastic groups, fantastic people who are on the ground who've been working on this for decades and who just really want to scale. And we know the solutions really, and they just want to scale them up. So it's really about working. Basically, we just, we're vetting the projects, we're looking at what they're doing. Sometimes, we have some advice, but it's really about letting them scale the work they're doing and believing in, their ability to know best what's best for the communities, what's best for the environment there. And a lot of the projects really do engage the communities. I mean, in India, we plant a lot of fruit trees with many different organizations. Sometimes it's with schools, it's with companies, it's universities, and that's really engaging the community a lot. And in some places, there's less of a kind of community aspect because it's just extremely remote areas where no one's really around. But in those places, I'm thinking, for example, of the kind of national forests in a lot of the US or national parks. But those are places which people really, really love to go out and enjoy, hike in and camp in. So there is also a social good that comes from that.
So for a lot of people that might be looking to partner with an organisation like One Tree Planted, they'll want to know the impact really in a facts and figures way. Saw on the website that in 2019, 4 million trees were planted in the ground, which is amazing. That must have been absolutely probably your best. Was that your best?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we for the last 2 years, we've basically kind of tripled every year in size.
Wow, that's amazing. Are there any other numbers that might give people some sort of idea on scale that you can?
Yeah, I mean, trees is really kind of often the key factor, because, the number of trees is something which people can really imagine. And people think a tree is not, really big, or, one tree doesn't make a difference, then they should just try to kind of, sometimes just cut down a tree in their back garden or something. And then you realize how I mean, so yeah, roughly kind of estimated, 4 million trees planted is about 30,000 hectares restored. And that, that's looking at maybe a rough ballpark figure of, maybe 1,500 to 2,000 trees per hectare. And it's, just with regards to kind of us and how many partners we had 4,500 business partners last year who donated.
Wow.
That's which is amazing. And those projects took place in 18 countries. And this year we've got a lot more countries and partners involved.
Has COVID impacted you a great deal this year?
I think definitely we saw a slowdown in the number of people kind of reaching out to us to work with us, especially in, I think, April and May, because there was so much uncertainty. And then with regards to planting, some projects had to be postponed. Some projects, the planting has been pushed to next year because, for example, in Peru, those communities, we work with indigenous communities who are in Peru who are 2 or 3 days, boat ride up a river from the nearest town. And those communities are very, very vulnerable to any type of virus. And they have little access to healthcare, and it would take a long time. So those communities basically just, when this all started, said no, shut off from the world, which is a very wise thing. And so that's why we had to be very careful, and postponed a lot of the work we did in Peru, South America. In other places, it has gone ahead. And, I think it's affected us overall this year a lot less than I thought it would when everything started.
Well, that's good. And I expect as well, it's given a lot of businesses time to reflect and think about things as well, because it's like taking a moment out of the daily rat race. Is definitely, for me, looking back, at first I was a little bit worried, like, what is this going to mean for me as a self-employed person? But actually I did lots of kind of proactive things. And so I think as long as you take a moment and pause and think about things from that point of view, then it's not all negative, is it? We can make good from this.
Yeah, and I think a lot of companies, you're right, they did kind of have a pause and use the time, maybe the slowdown in their normal activities, to launch new initiatives, to evaluate how they could do things better and differently.
We spoke at the start about some of the partners of One Tree Planted. Are there any others that would be good to mention as part of the organisation?
Very cool, very exciting partnership, which we've just launched in the last few months, is a partnership with the Jane Goodall Institute. Jane Goodall, the primatologist, who obviously, we saw a lot about her on us. She's been on our screens a long time. Her work with chimpanzees, very groundbreaking. And so we're going to work with the Jane Goodall Institute to plant 3 million trees in Uganda.
Oh, so cool.
And they're great. They've been on the ground out there for decades. And they're going to have community-run nurseries, and it's planting specifically in the Albertine Rift, which is a region, I believe it's in the west of Uganda, southwest of Uganda, to restore chimpanzee habitat in the hills. And strategically planting as well, so connecting the remaining habitats. But yes, that's an exciting new project.
Are there any other ways that people can get involved in this? I saw that there was some said about employee engagement and potential, I guess, team building and in planting trees. Are there any ways that people who may not want to partner now may like to do their bit?
Yeah, so we do organize events. I mean, that's actually probably where COVID affected us the most. Was that in April, normally for Earth Day, we have kind of dozens and dozens of events, tree planting events where people come out and plant trees. And that's carried out by our kind of local partners. And people would be able to come out and take part. That all got cancelled because that would have been in April. But I suggest for people to just look out for events, volunteering opportunities. We do organize events, so there's some on our site. Otherwise, I would really encourage people to get in touch with their local environmental groups. Almost in the UK, every county has a little wildlife group who do really important work, and they always need volunteers. So reaching out, thinking global, acting local, and then even just small things. For example, planting a tree in your backyard or making a little pond in the backyard for kind of frogs and newts and all the little critters to come hang out. There's so many little things people can do. And I think it's also really nice, I feel, kind of on a fundamental level, to kind of physically connect and create little landscapes or repair landscapes, planting trees. I think that it's very rewarding.
Just to kind of talk a little bit about the creative process at One Tree Planted, kind of look like, do you have like round table discussions where you talk about ideas and things like that, or how do you kind of keep things new and exciting? And
so twice a week we meet. We have a big meeting, all of our team, which is people from all over. And yes, we look at, for example, projects. We have organizations reaching out to us, telling us, hey, we have this great project. We're planting trees here. Can we partner on this? And we look through those. We look at what are the projects which are happening. We look at, our messaging. What is something which we could share with people? Maybe we're going to write an article, make a new series of videos. A lot of our communication is done through video. We have, a YouTube channel where we've launched recently a new series of videos about the state of California, where our camera team went out there, talked to, government people, NGOs, environmental organizations about California. So, and we're always bouncing these ideas around. And it's good because I feel like we're a nice size where we can, very quickly exchange ideas, very quickly act on ideas that we have if we want to implement something. And so it's a really nice environment for kind of bouncing ideas off each other. And when we want to make something happen, we can make it happen very quickly.
Fantastic. I mean, my last question on the podcast is always about, I guess, some advice for people, something inspirational that's relative to you or the organisation that you work for. Or so we kind of touched on it earlier about, thinking global, acting local, getting in touch with local people. But is there anything any bit of inspirational advice that you could offer people that they can take away from this?
Personally, I think, really good advice is, in general, I feel like we all need to kind of lower our consumption. We all need to, maybe, well, for example, you said that you stopped eating meat because of the impact it has. So we need to really look at what are the things which we can do. Maybe we don't need to buy, that extra t-shirt or, that new jacket, and the one we have now is fine. So there's that side, the kind of consumption side, consuming responsibly. And then I think, really rewarding, I can't emphasize enough, is just spending time in nature, learning about the species which are in your backyard or, in our environment. Our rivers in the UK are, full of amazing creatures. Our hedgerows are just also full of fantastic little creatures. So it's really great. I think the most rewarding thing is learning about our kind of local environment and then finding wonder in it, because, you were talking about that kind of childlike worry, but there is also childlike wonder. And it is possible, I think, to rediscover that in what's around us. So getting out there, learning about the plants, the birds, maybe taking photos of them, and rediscovering that kind of childlike wonder of the natural world.
I think that's brilliant advice, and I've certainly done that. In the last few years, I've just become, I think, because I've realised how important it is for me personally, for my mental health and happiness, to be in nature more. So I walk all the time with my dog, and we go to different places, and I just love just sitting in my garden. Or actually, in the last couple of years, I've got into gardening, and never thought that would be me, but it is me now, and I love it. And I thought, am I officially old now? Because I love just being in the garden, like planting things. And I've just amazed myself, really. This year I've done tomatoes, and I've got a herb garden, and I'm growing different types of chilies, and I'm always out there picking things, and I'm cooking. And I just think it's amazing if you just allow yourself. And, you know, that compared to a teenage version of me that worked in Topshop, and I was buying clothes all the time, just, that's not fashionable now. And now I'm like, I don't need that t-shirt, like you said. Just want to be in the garden. Exactly.
And I think, you know, especially at a time when everyone is spending so much time, you know, we're all so much on screens, and sometimes, you know, we're using social media to get approval from others, and we're trying to get this sense of well-being. I feel just producing food, growing plants, you know, having your hands in soil, kind of sustaining yourself, growing your own food and being in that environment, really, I feel satisfies something very fundamental, and there's something just fundamentally wholesome about it, and it's so peaceful. So that's fantastic. I wish I had a garden. See, I'm in a flat, but if I didn't, it's full of plants. But gardening is also just a wonderful way.
It definitely is. I feel totally inspired from this conversation. I just think it's just, I don't know, it's just opened my mind up to go away and like research a little bit more, and definitely about soil. That's a massive takeaway for me from this. Like, I mean, I take it for granted, you know, I never really thought we needed to really think about it that much, but of course it's everything. So I'm so grateful that you've come and spoken to me. I've really enjoyed it.
Welcome.
How was that for you? So it's amazing, actually, because I get to engage and participate in those conversations in real time, but then in the edit, I get to relive it again. And what was amazing about this episode for me is that I was reminded in the edit why I went self-employed in the first place, which was just heavily around building something with positive impact, where the values really speak to me, and a lot of that is about being green. So I hope that you've also left this conversation feeling a bit more green, feeling keen for green, whatever you want to call it, green bean. I just hope that you feel richer from that conversation as I do. They're an absolutely amazing organisation. Please go and check them out. One Tree Planted. Donate to them, get involved. Look at organisations in your local area. Get your hands in soil, get in your garden, you know, do all those things. And I can certainly say from a personal point of view that for me, having done a lot of those things and changed, you know, the way I'm approaching things in that way, that I feel richer, I feel better, I feel more connected with nature. I feel it's impacting my well-being in a really positive way. Huge thank you to Lewis for giving up his time to come and chat with me. It was an amazing conversation, and I'm so grateful. If you would like to find out a little bit more about Koala Marketing, what we do, unified marketing for small to medium-sized businesses, go check us out, www.koalamarketing.co.uk. We're on all the social channels, so give us a follow, drop us a message. And if you're a change maker with a story to tell, we would love to hear from you. And lastly, just please remember to subscribe, rate and review. Have a wonderful rest of the week, everyone. See you later.